Welcome to Crosstalk, the show where we put Jesus in the middle of every conversation that we have. We prosecute issues in the church, we prosecute issues in society, and today we have an interesting conversation. One really closed book, pastors' wives. Those guys, we think they live in heaven. We think they come to earth on Sunday with their husbands to speak to us. And we want to just understand today, who are these pastors' wives? What is their world like? What does it take to be one? And what are the pains? So today, really, really amazing panel I have here. We have Mrs. Rose Ewagata, wife to Reverend David Ewagata. Thank you very much for coming on the show. We have Mrs. Nellie Oduor, wife to Reverend John Mark Oduor. Thank you for coming to this show.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. So, ladies, tell me, who's a pastor's wife? Of course, it's the wife of a pastor, but, you know, what does that role entail? Any of you can go, it's all right.
Yeah, she's the woman who nobody knows her name, but knows her husband. Based on his function as a pastor.
Interesting.
Yeah. You know, we were talking with Nelly the other time. It's like people can relate with you if you introduce yourself as by your name, your one name, let's say your first name.
They miss you.
Yeah, it's like, oh, until you say, oh, Ewagata, and then you're Pastor Ewagata, and people refer us as to Pastor so-and-so's wife. Yeah. You know, so.
How's that for you? Does it feel neglectful in some sort of way?
I think with time, you make peace. It can get really dicey in you know, if you take it personally. But with time, you make peace with it and realize that it's an association. It's based on that association that, because they relate more with the person of your husband, and you become less resentful or less affected by it. By
being relegated to the shadows.
Yes.
Nelly, what's that like for you?
Yeah, I take it as a role. It's a role. Pastor's wife is a role. You're a wife to a pastor. And of course, as Rose has mentioned, I think you have to choose. You have to make a choice. Does it affect you? Do you feel it's like being called Mama so and so? You know. So I'm happy these days they recognize pastors' wives, even when a guest preacher comes. And my wife is in the crowd. Let me introduce her. They stand. But for many years, I never saw it. So it's something that I think they recognized. The pastors' wives just stayed in the shadows, and yet they had roles, and especially in the mainstream.
What
churches.
are these roles? What are these roles?
Many roles.
Nelly.
Bibi mchungaji.
Yes. Mama mchungaji.
Mama mchungaji. Yes. And I think that's one thing that we need to just bear it out, because first you are a person. You're God's daughter. You're a person. You're an individual.
You have your individual entity.
And now you've come into this new role. Other than a wife, you're now a pastor's wife. You're a companion to the pastor. You know. But there's so many things that are expected of you. You should be prayerful. You should be a chorist, perhaps, be able to sing. You should be able to coordinate people, arrange things, arrange everything. Organize.
Yes.
I tend to think that's what they think that role should be.
You're the assistant to the man of God.
Exactly,
Yes.
or the assistant. Yes, actually.
You're the secretary.
The secretary.
You're the PA.
You should know his diary.
The PR.
Exactly. You should know his diary. Where is he? How do you organize? Who should visit? Who's coming? You generally, yes, that assistant.
And so what has that been like for you, Rose? You know, like, what has it panned out over the years?
That is pressure, one, just being honest, because you might not be at that place where you have that capacity to be all these things that people expect you to be. That is quite a bit of pressure. And in many ways, what it does, it causes you to be very afraid to make mistakes, for instance, because the expectations are that you're perfect, that you know what you're doing. And yet, when you begin this journey, this role, you begin as a young inexperienced person. It's not like you go for training to be a pastor's wife. It's not like you go for orientation when you're preparing to be married. You are preparing to be married as a wife, not as a pastor's wife, as a wife. And so your preparation is to be his wife, not to be his PR, PA, secretary, you know.
And assistant pastor.
Yes. And so it makes you feel very inadequate. I remember my first, because I got married, we got married pretty young. I was barely 23 years old. And feeling that weight of, oh my God, I'm a pastor's wife. What does that...
Were you already in ministry?
We were already in ministry. We met in ministry. We were serving as high-capacity volunteers in our local church.
Nah, that's a nice term.
So we had already given ourselves to ministry and already sensed the call of God in our lives. And it wasn't confirmed that by the institution we were working with, the church we were working with, that you are now pastors. But we were operating, especially for my husband, was already operating as a pastor. So after we got married is when now they confirmed.
Nobody trained you?
Nobody trained us.
Nobody prepared you?
Nobody prepares you for being a pastor's wife. You're prepared to be a believer. You're prepared to be a wife.
No manual?
No manual.
No, nothing in theological school, because I think you went to theological.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And I think that's what propelled me to that desire to go to Bible school. Because I felt I needed to be prepared. I needed to be equipped. I needed to learn how to do this. As a wife and as a pastor myself, sensing a calling of God over my life. In a space where not so many women were in ministry, not so many pastors' wives were actively involved in ministry alongside their husbands. So for me, I felt that was what actually propelled me to consider going to Bible school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Nelly, tell us, you're from the, well, for the sake of this conversation, we'll classify and say the mainline churches that where the pastor's wife is not considered a pastor. And Rose here represents, the not mainline churches. That doesn't diminish them in any way. It's a Pentecostal charismatic where the pastor's wife is considered by institution a pastor. So now for you, Nelly, what is that like in terms of expectation? You sit in the crowd, you mingle with the crowd, you still stand out, but you're not considered a pastor. How does that pan out?
Yeah, for me, if I think of my journey, I think when we got married, my husband was already being called to full-time ministry. So when he went to theological school, there was a program for pastors' wives, actually, where we stayed. So we had aside some
conversation.
Yes, for some of us who are working, so they would organize something either on a weekend, and they would in fact invite even clergy, bishops and their wives, and they would come to talk to us and tell us, this is what to expect when you enter now into this in full time.
Interesting.
So I got some kind of a way and understanding. Yeah, hey, what am I entering into? And especially for me being a career person, so it was also going to be something that I needed to order
just
myself.
To interject there,
Yes.
you are not a theologian.
No, I'm not a theologian.
You are not a preacher.
Nope, I'm not.
You are not. What are the functions pastors are known for? Preaching, theology, counseling. You don't work in a church.
I do not work in a church.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So you work in the secular world.
Exactly.
All right, continue. I just wanted to interject that.
So you can imagine, yes, for somebody now who has now all those hats. So those are different hats. And of course, the expectations, of course, for the pastor's wife, we didn't even have a specific area that you're sitting. Like now, where you have the pastor's wife in the Pentecostal, they have a specific seat. For us,
next to the pastor.
Next to the pastor, first lady, or so and so. For us in the mainstream, it's not very specific. Even though right now, I think they're now starting to warm up to recognize the office of a pastor's wife. Not necessarily the office, but just the role. The role. Just recognize that
But you're
person.
assigned, if you are in a typical parish setup, for instance, in the Anglican Church, you're assigned role of Mother's Union Chair.
Yes, Mother's Union Chair.
You know, you also do certain things. Do those come in as, do those qualify as theologically institutional? What are those?
Yes, I know, especially if the pastor is the vicar, then they expect the spouse actually to be the patron of that Mother's Union. You know, hopefully then if there are other, you know, but at least the chairperson usually, there is somebody who's elected, but the patron is usually the vicar's wife. Yes, and that's what I've seen. But you may find some people, in fact, even when we were talking earlier, you become self-conscious if you don't feel you can't even equip, you know, you don't have the equipment, the capability to even interact with all these people you're being told to be charged over. So you've got to have something that will give you a role and self-esteem, you know. And that's the thing that we need to actually break. Because they expect you to have all these things, to be a manager, to be hospitable, to be humble, to be, you know, everything. But you don't have those qualities. But is there a place where we can learn that you've entered, especially if you're entering, your spouse may enter into full ministry way into your marriage. And I've seen those couples. And you're thinking, this is how my husband was behaving. And now, okay, so now we have a new different setup. You know, so there's got to be a way to prepare. And those expectations can wear you down and make you feel so self-conscious, and you just diminish, and you just want to be
Isolate
and just be
one.
Yes, to be at the back, you know.
Okay. Rose, tell us a little bit about the world of pastors' wives who are pastors.
Yes.
Do you get accorded the same honor, dignity, respect, you know, elevation as
I think
the
different
pastor?
spaces, different responses or perceptions.
But ordinarily,
Yeah,
what
ordinarily.
happens?
Ordinarily, the pastor's wife is recognized as a pastor. So she is expected to provide spiritual discipleship, nurturing. She has pastoral duties.
She has an office.
She has an office.
Okay.
She has an office. She's dispensing pastoral duties.
Responsibilities.
She's leading. Yes, she's leading.
Does she have a salary?
She has a
Separate
salary
from
in
pastor?
some spaces. Yeah, she has a salary separate from the pastor. And basically, she's recognized as a person who has a calling into ministry and given all the rights and privileges that come with that. Then there's the pastor. There's also, in these circles, there is also the woman, the wife, who is the pastor, and the husband is not the pastor.
Ooh, wow.
Yes.
So what do you call that? That's not a pastor's wife.
He's a
That
supportive.
is the pastor.
He's the one who is the spouse to the pastor. He's the pastor's husband.
This is amazing.
Yes, and
Okay.
we have those. They are few, but they're there. Where the woman is the one who has the calling into ministry, and the man, the husband is the supportive spouse.
So does the
He
husband
doesn't
then
have
become
an
the
office.
pastor?
No, he doesn't have an office. He doesn't necessarily feel obliged to perform pastoral duties in the church. His work is to support the spouse, who is the pastor, who is the
So
wife.
how doesn't that become different in the same organization? Is that practiced in the same organization?
In some
Sometimes
cases, yes, but
there.
in most is where the wife is the founder, maybe, of the church.
Okay.
Yeah. Or
Okay.
she's the one who has been posted, let's say, to a certain.
So the spouse
Church.
here then becomes the main supporter.
Yes.
But does not hold a pastoral office
No.
and does not have any pastoral responsibilities.
No.
Very interesting.
So the
And we-
best he can do in that space, as expected, even with the situation where the wife is the support of the husband, is that they are expected to also exercise and express their spiritual gifting, find their space
Yeah.
to express their spiritual gifting and whatever it is that they feel the Lord has called them to do. Not just to be supporting in terms of sitting there and saying amen to the sermons, but still expected to be thriving and finding, whether it's children's ministry, whether it's in the worship ministry, whether it's working with the young people or working with the women ministry, they still are a disciple who is finding spaces in the body of Christ to express their gift. So at any point, should they see weakness or
they're
gaps
wondering,
or they dismiss you, they're like, oh, we thought you are perfect. You should. They judge you harshly.
We didn't expect this of you.
Yes, despite the fact that they themselves have the same challenges.
Have the same challenges. Yeah.
This is the point where we take a break. We are having an interesting conversation about these guys we think live in heaven and visit Earth every Sunday, pastors' wives. What is their world like? How do they deal? How do they get down to doing things? We're taking a break. We'll be back shortly.
Our mission is centered on Christ's call of the Great Commission, but we don't do this work alone.
So we are 24 years on air. And we can do that because you helped us to do it, to fulfill what Jesus was asking me to do.
Join us on Behind the Scenes and get inspired through candid conversations with our partners as they share their life stories and why they are committed to supporting family media.
Family media has really helped me personally to grow. And one of the reasons why I give is because I would want others also to grow like me.
I believe there was a nudging in my spirit to know God for me, such that even though I moved away and experimented in life, God made sure that I found my way back.
Also, stay in the know of activities we are involved in as we keep Jesus on the airwaves. Behind the Scenes every Friday at 8:30 p.m. and repeats on Sundays at 9 p.m. only on Family TV.
Welcome back to Crosstalk. Today we are talking about pastors' wives. Would you believe that? We want to know what happens in their lives, and we want to know what do they do? How do they cope when there are issues? When we went for the break, Rose and Nelly, you were telling us how you deal with your pain.
Yeah.
What are your support systems? You're saying you have to find one. Yeah. So tell us more about that, even as you tell us about roles.
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, what do you do as a pastor's wife?
I think with time,
Job description.
You realize church might not be the safe space you're looking for.
Yeah.
Because of the, the expectations, the scrutiny, the judgment, and you really do not want to expose yourself to that place of exposing that hurt and pain, and it causes more hurt and pain when you do that.
So you hold this pain into your heart?
Yes. So a lot of us, with I think earlier beginning years, we held back a lot.
Yeah.
We carried a lot in our hearts and had to be intentional in finding safe spaces with time and looking out for who can I trust, who understands my journey, who understands my predicament, who understands the challenges that I'm facing. And for one, I think for me and my husband, we found peers that we have worked together through the years outside of the ministry space. People that are within safe space of understanding where we are, and they're not within the limits of the boundaries of ministry. So outside of that, people who are in ministry also and understand the journey, they understand the pitfalls, they understand everything that we are going through, and they are married. So they understand how that balancing act works.
Okay.
And if you can find, and I'm not saying that you can never find people within the ministry, but they have to have the maturity
to
know what to do with the information you give them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nelly, how did you find yours?
Yes, I think it's because I had an accountability friends as well. And that group, none of them was in ministry, so to speak. but there are specific people who you could say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I don't know how to cope, with that. But there is also another group where we have people who are in ministry. So we have a way of even now, maybe even having times to pray and to just see how are we doing. Are there things we need to work on? And we are at different stages of marriage. Some of them look up to me, others we look up to, And then we also look at, just the way Rose has mentioned, about getting somebody mature enough who has gone through that journey. They've been in ministry for many more years. And for them, they'll also tell you, oh, we journeyed through it. But over the years, we learned how to navigate and how to sort out issues and to find a way that we can talk, and find a space. Because again, and especially if it's a situation your spouse you're having a struggle with, that's even the most difficult, It's not even too much about even the ministry, so to speak. But with your spouse, then, first of all, it's marriage. It's no longer even just the heart of ministry. That needs to be sorted out, because that's where the heart is broken. It's not so much. But then we also now have to find out, all right, Lord, you called him. And especially for me, he was called. So me, I knew from day one, wow, I have got to see how to support.
It's going to be a roller coaster.
No, I need to see how I'll support him. I remember one reverend telling me, Nelly, if this guy gets out of ministry, you are to blame.
Oh, wow.
I had that burden.
Yeah, we need that pressure.
Wow.
That was pressure from day one. And I said, God, give me grace. Give me grace that I'll be able to be that supportive spouse. So it was for me to adjust and to see. But I also had to take care of my heart. So I had to have peace. And one of the virtue I learned was patience. Most people find me very patient. When you see me cross, then things are you've really crossed the right line. So the patience, I had to learn patience, that waiting ministry. I even called it a waiting ministry. You're thinking, we were meant to be here at this time. We are still here. That was one thing I learned, God's timing.
Yes.
God's timing. In fact, one of the things I remember we crossed about was that thing. Then I said, and when we reached at the next event, that was the right time. And I said, hey, okay, for real, God, ni timing yako tu. It's your timing. And that's something I started learning. And trusting God in your journey.
You people live with very busy people.
Oh, yes.
Busy doesn't cut it for relationships.
No.
And busy doesn't cut it for parenting. Okay, so what do? Your husband is never there, or there minimally, and is out because of necessity. So how do you manage?
I think understanding your role as helper, suitable. Yeah, the Bible calls us suitable helper.
Exactly. Yeah.
Finding you're suitable because you're just what he needs.
Yeah.
For that season or time, or ministry or calling or vocation, you are suitable. You are actually gifted, equipped, empowered for that role by God. It's in there. So finding that role and embracing that role as a helper. Helper doesn't necessarily mean less. It doesn't mean you're relegated to the things that are not important.
Back streets.
The back streets. Yeah. But what you do, even when you are at home, holding fort at home, taking care of those children, that is important. One of the things I don't like to do is go to those basement parkings and all that. But whenever I'm going there, I imagine this huge, massive building going so many floors up, and there are pillars that hold this building. And you look at these pillars and you wonder, how do those pillars hold up that whole building with people, with equipment, with everything? But I think that's a picture of this woman. She might be underground at the basement sometimes, but she's doing an important job of holding
up the entire edifice that can be seen.
Yes.
Now tell me about parenting, because that's the other thing that doesn't go well with absence and busy.
Yes.
My understanding and my thinking is that you people carry a heavy load in raising children, these children, pastors' children. What goes on in that space when Papa is not home?
Not easy.
And that happens to be quite a bit of time. What happens?
Yeah, not easy, and especially when they are younger, when you know you need both of you. So it's something that it has to be also intentional, you know. So even when the husband is also very busy, there'll be times when he's there, so he spends time with them. You know, when he's not, now that they're grown now, you know, there'll be now specific times you'll have times with them. And they also got to learn the role their dad has, you know. But you've also got to protect him so that they don't also miss out that it's only mommy who does things. Daddy is never there. So you've also got to have that balance. Draw him.
Remind him.
Remind him.
You're better off having your one present, fully present, because that one comes and goes. But this one is fully present and assuring them that they are still very important in the family. So a lot of patience, a lot of balance is also required.
As well.
In as much as we serve in ministries that require and demand of us, it's also good that these ministries understand that without you being in a healthy space as a family, you are not going to be effective.
Wow.
Yeah. And keeping the marriage a priority, and it's us against the world. That one of we are together in this.
And parenting, of course.
Yes.
Parenting, yes.
So the marriage as a couple, because the children thrive in a marriage that is healthy.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So you are healthy, then it overflows to your children, they become healthy, then it overflows to your ministry, it becomes healthy.
Wow. Let me take closing comments. Nelly, what would you advise an aspiring
Is
pastor's wife?
aspiring pastor's wife, identify your gifting and ask God to open doors for you to have that space, to be able to exercise that gifting, to be patient, to be humble, have an open conversation with your spouse, and hopefully they're able to listen and to accommodate you and to make you grow. And be knowing that your first ministry is in the home. Is in the home. If there is peace in the home, if mama is not happy, there'll be no peace in that home. So whether she's wearing many hats, she has also to seek God for that peace. She has to be peaceful to be able to share that peace even in the home before she shares it out in the ministry in church.
Rose, closing comments.
Yes. Capacity to be who God has called you to be comes from the Lord himself.
Yes.
And you always must seek to grow in your area of ministry, in your area of calling, even as a spouse.
Yes.
That capacity is not inborn. It's
Yes.
developed with time. That patience, that security in who you are, that whatever it is that you need for that journey comes from the Lord. So it's very important that we embrace that in God. And, you know, in the areas where there are gaps, there's lack, there's inadequacy, it comes from the Lord. And seeking to grow. One of the things I've done personally as a pastor's wife is seeking to grow in knowledge, in understanding, in wisdom, so that I can be the best version that I need to be as a pastor's wife. So seeking knowledge, if you can get a training,
Yes.
if you can get mentors,
Exactly,
if you can get to equip you in the areas that you feel, this I'm not strong at. If it's counseling, you find that people just come to you because you are the pastor's wife. And you find, I don't have the counseling skills. Go to school, learn some counseling, find some training, equip yourself. And there are resources out there.
Oh, yes.
In the areas of marriage, equip yourself, read books, look for people who can be mentors and have resource in the area of marriage and parenting.
Exactly.
Look for people who have more experience. Look for resources. They're out there. Because wisdom calls out. It's in the streets. She says, where? Who?
Your children.
Yes. Yeah. Wisdom calls out. It's available. But we need to source this out so that we can build capacity to be what God has called us to be.
Indeed.
Mrs. Rose Wagata, thank you very much for your time and your wisdom. Mrs. Nelly Odwor, thank you for coming. Thank you for your time and thank you for your wisdom.
Thank you for having
Well, we have talked to people we always thought lived in heaven.
We are human
But now we can see they struggle just like us. And pastors' wives are a special lot in our midst. I want to give you an assignment. Reach out to one, pray with them, encourage them. They probably won't tell you what they're going through, but pray with them and pray for them. We have learned many tips. If you're out there and you're a pastor's wife, be encouraged. There's help for you. Find friends. Don't walk alone. Yes. In difficult seasons, tough it out with your husband. And may God bless you. This has been Crosstalk, where we put Jesus in the airwaves and we bring the cross into the middle of every conversation. Till next week. See you.